Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. It's the Sleep Number biggest sale of the year. All beds on sale up to 50% off the limited edition smart bed. Plus free premium delivery with any smart bed and adjustable base. Ends Labor Day. All Sleep Number smart beds offer temperature solutions for your best sleep. Check it out at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com today.
Searching for a romantic summer getaway? Escape with Rich Girl Summer, the new Audible original from Lily Chu. The exquisitely talented Philippa Sue, returning to narrate her 5th Lily Chu title. This time, Philippa is joined by her real-life husband, Stephen Pasquale. Set in Toronto's wealthy cottage country, aka the Hamptons of Canada, Rich Girl Summer follows the story of Valerie, a down-on-her-luck event planner posing as a socialite's long-lost daughter, while piecing together the secrets surrounding a mysterious family and falling deeper and deeper in love with the impossibly hard-to-read and infuriatingly handsome family assistant, Nico. Caught between pretending to belong and unexpectedly finding where she truly fits in, Valerie learns her summer is about to get far more complicated than she ever planned. She's in over her head and head over heels. Listen to Rich Girl Summer now on Audible. Go to audible.com/richgirlsummer.
So my first thought is always for the Native community. I think, and I've seen this so far, and it really just warms my heart, is when you have other families that are going through this, they're able to see themselves in the people that are in the film, in Christine, in Dion's story, and in their family, and have gone through the same frustrating processes. And I think for them, it's being seen, right? You are finally seeing on a big screen in an amplified way what you've been battling yourself. And I feel like that's been a bit healing for some people to see that and to be able to relate and feel not alone. For outside community members, my hope is that they will feel a call to action, a call to support.
That's Amanda Erickson, the director of the documentary She Cried That Day. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. The trailer is haunting. It begins with young Diane Thomas talking in front of a crowd saying, "I was so happy to see my dad stand up and talk. There are so many girls with big mouths in our family." Her next words are unclear as the roar of laughter comes over the crowd. In the next frame, Diane's mom is seen holding a picture of her when she was a child and says, "I don't care what age your child is. You remember them like this. And when they're this age, you will never think that they will grow up and go through these things. And you will never lose them." Her mother talks about how Diane never cries. And then, with tears in her eyes, she says, "But for some reason, she cried that day." The next scenes roll through Diane's sisters saying that if you want to get away with killing someone, make sure it's a Native woman. A newspaper clipping with Diane's death in Gallup, New Mexico in April 2015, the police initially said was likely to be a homicide. And then a crescendo of images. A map of the United States with faces of missing and murdered Indigenous women flashing one at a time onto it, so full by the end of it that you can barely recognize the state borders. A march and a woman with the familiar red handprint on her face used to represent the missing and murdered Indigenous women's crisis in the United States. Amanda Erickson was born into the Whitewater clan of the San Carlos Apache, and she's a storyteller who's committed to centering Indigenous voices. Amanda did not grow up with her tribe and grew up across the United States and the East Coast, and later reconnected with her father and her roots. There are, of course, echoes I feel between the experience of Indigenous people and those of my Black ancestors. We were enslaved, denied citizenship, stripped of wealth, and terrorized. But what makes the Indigenous experience distinct is that while slavery is an original sin that cannot easily be erased from American history, the story of Indigenous people has often been subjected to deliberate erasure through assimilation, relocation, and silence. Simply bearing witness contributes to the tide pushing back against it. Healing is what inspired Amanda's film, which powerfully combines a deeply personal exploration of the missing and murdered Indigenous women's crisis with a cultural critique of the front lines in New Mexico and Amanda's own story. Before becoming a director, Amanda spent 16 years as a producer for places like National Geographic, Discovery, Hulu, the Travel Channel, and Curiosity Stream. Her transition into independent documentary making was driven by bringing a nuanced and fresh perspective to the stories of Native communities and bringing that to mainstream audiences. The film premiered at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival this year and was recently shown at the Brooklyn Film Festival in New York. Today, we're going to talk about her story, silence and erasure, the opportunity to lift marginalized voices, the importance of storytelling and bringing alive real-world challenges, and because of the quiet erasure the Native communities have faced, how important it is for the mainstream audiences to hear these stories. Hey, Amanda, I just wanted to thank you for joining. I really appreciated the opportunity to meet you through Christine Means and Karen Watson, Diane's sisters. And as you probably know, this is a topic that I'm passionate about, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. It was really lovely getting a chance just to chat with you a little bit during their interviews. And I just really am thankful and appreciate how thoughtful you were with them. And they really enjoyed it.
Oh,
Very excited.
that's great to hear. One of the things that I've been thinking about lately is the importance of storytelling. And, as somebody who's Black American, there are a lot of things where I really relate to the Indigenous experience. We went through similar things, like our citizenship was either questioned or not allowed, being terrorized, our wealth, our land being taken. But one thing that's really on this journey been very, I think, striking to me is it is very hard. It would be very hard to write slavery in the Black American experience with slavery out of the history books of the United States because it's so simple.
Mm.
But, natives in the US have constantly faced erasure. I think of things like forcing children to go to boarding schools and not learning their languages, different attempts at assimilation, relocation off the reservations to major cities, even, so much. And just even the fact today that in the average dialogue, you don't hear a lot about Indigenous people too. And so that difference I see is really that Indigenous people in the United States have faced erasure in a way that I think would be very hard. And that really makes me think about the importance of storytelling and telling stories and bearing witness. And I wanted to go ahead and start and ask just a little bit about what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, absolutely. Funnily enough, I just finished working on a project that really explored California history from a Native perspective. And it was eye-opening even to me as a Native woman, you know, just learning the very violent um, uh, it's a little hard to face, but it is also just made me realize that when I'm meeting other Native people and, you know, in that respect, California Native people, it was like, this is a miracle that we have survived and are thriving and are doing amazing things after under when you understand the history that went on and how that history, exactly like you said, has oftentimes been overlooked or um, retold from the colonizer perspective. So you've always got to question, who's telling this, what reasonings might they have behind telling the history this way, and that just made me kind of really take that on and question a lot of things. But it also just made me appreciate all the amazing, amazing things that Native people are working on and doing in this world. Um, but yeah.
I share your appreciation. I was just writing a little essay for actually a book that I'm writing, which this is the first time I'm talking about it on the podcast. And one of the things that I was writing was about an Ojibwe woman that I met who had become friends with me and a part of my support system. And one of the things that I marveled at in the early stages of our friendship was what a miracle it is that our ancestors survived, that we were even born, that we met each other, and that we became friends. And I was writing in the essay, and it really rings to the point that you were making before, that having conversations about Indigenous people is the song I sing for that miracle. Because it's just simply amazing, given the adversity that all of our people have had, that we're even here. And yeah, it's interesting you bring that up today because I literally put those words on paper today.
Uh, it's just it's a hard history, but I think it's an important one to recognize because it makes you so grateful and excited about Indigenous futures. And then I also saw a video today where there was a Native content creator who was kind of asking people, how many federally recognized tribes are there in the United States? And barely anyone knew. Some people, I think only one person actually answered with 20. And there are, I think it's
534.
574,
Yeah.
74 or something. Yeah. And so it makes me realize, it makes me excited about telling more of our stories. Um,
Yeah.
s- yeah.
Yeah, because as Americans, and I can say this about the Black American experience or the Native experience, our stories are America's stories. That is a part of America's story that we just don't, for whatever reasons, don't talk about as much. You spent, what was it, 16 years as a film producer. And I know every film producer I've ever met in my life wanted to be a director. But I was curious about why you chose a topic like this for your first film.
Yeah, well, I had really been a TV producer. I started out in daytime talk, a funnel yeah, daytime talk with Montel Williams, working on his show for a long time, Tyra Banks, Dr. Oz, and then kind of made the change to unscripted series work, doc series, and worked a lot on historical series and true crime. And through kind of that work, especially in the true crime realm, I think I tend to be a bit more sensitive. So it didn't matter how much or how many times I'd worked on a story and a case, it really stayed with me a little bit. And it was during that time that I myself was reconnecting with my culture, reconnecting with my dad and my Apache relatives. And it was kind of like the perfect storm of things just coming together for me in the right time, in the right moment. And I had actually never had interest in directing or making anything of my own, honestly, until that reconnection to culture happened for me. One of the first things my dad did was take me to a sunrise ceremony on our reservation within our community. And I just remember so distinctly kind of driving in the car. We're, going down this dirt road and you can start to hear the drums, the singing, and we're kind of going over a little hill. And as we crossed over the hill, it was just like what felt like hundreds of people dancing around this enormous bonfire, the largest bonfire I'd ever seen. And we walked down and joined all of my relatives, dancing and praying and singing and watching this young girl um, power through and just be a force in her ceremony. And my dad kind of leaned over to me and said, "You're related to everyone here. You're home." And
Mm.
I was instantly changed. Instantly.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
And after I left that weekend from the ceremony, I felt an intense responsibility to my culture, to my people, to my relatives, to my ancestors, and just wanted to utilize whatever skills I had to amplify Native issues, Native voices, and just work with community in doing so. And at that same time, you started hearing murmurs of MMIW, and I just started doing a lot of research. And at that time, a report by the Urban Indian Health Institute had come out, and New Mexico had the most number of missing and murdered Indigenous women cases. And so I started focusing on New Mexico and seeing what stories were there and how I could help.
Mm. It's interesting, that moment where you're reconnecting with your culture, and I can only imagine how powerful that moment where your dad said, "You're home," was. But, in Star Trek, for example, Voyager, there's this collective called the Borg, and they float around the universe in giant cubes. And part of what they do is they go to different planets, they conquer the planets, they take, over the species, and then they assimilate them into the Borg cube, and you become a drone inside the cube, and sort of along those lines. I sort of think America's a bit like that, which is like, I feel like they were making a metaphor for some of America that,
Awesome. Yeah.
that like, if you do not assimilate, and the line that they say is assimilate or die. If you don't assimilate an American culture, at least historically, and maybe that's shifting a little bit, and I'd love to hear what you think about that. It was almost looked down upon not to assimilate, not to be like an a quote unquote American, where they're talking about, really what they're talking about is sort of the white male model of Americans. And I'm curious for you, what does it mean to reconnect with your culture? What did that feel like for you, and what did it mean to you?
For me, my reconnection happened much later in life as an adult, and I really believe that it happened in when I was ready to kind of receive it as well. I grew up away from my father since I was, a really young child, a baby, really, on the other side of what basically could have been the other side of the world on the East Coast, while he was in Arizona. And you know, as children, I think we learn very quickly, like what you're allowed to talk about or ask questions about, and what you're not. And I had kind of learned that you don't really ask about dad and you don't ask about that, but
Mhm.
I knew I was, different. I had brown skin and brown eyes and brown hair, and my other family members didn't. And I grew up always being asked, like, "What are you? What is your background?" Or lots of people thought I was Latina, but and for me, I always knew I was Apache. That was never, kind of kept from me, but I didn't know what that meant. What did that really
Mm.
mean to
Mhm.
be an Apache woman? I had no idea. And I think maybe I shied away from it during some parts of my life because it comes with a lot of that, I think a lot of the pain of not having my father in my life for a long time.
Yeah.
But when I, was ready to kind of take all of that on, the pain of the past, and he was, and we were able to kind of see each other in a new light, me as an adult now. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And if it wasn't for him coming back into my life, I don't know that I would have been able to make this film.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's a it's an interesting thing because it seems like that moment with your dad and that moment where I'm guessing you felt like you were home was not just a catalyst for reconnection, but it was inspiration. And then that inspiration eventually evolved into
yes,
this
absolutely.
work.
Because the beauty and the strength and the power that I saw in those girls and those young women during their ceremony, those days of dancing, of praying, of doing the work, it was inspiring to me. And that same kind of feeling came over me when I started to speak with the different women that were doing the work with missing and murdered in New Mexico. It was that same in awe. I had prepared myself to maybe feel, to get ready for the sadness or the tragedy of the stories, and was really more so blown away by the power, and strength of the women.
Yeah, and I guess we tend to focus on things like the crisis or the challenges of the problems, but I think there's a flip side to the whole thing. And I think a flip side, not just to the fact that there's struggle, but to different cultures themselves. There's great wisdom that can be pulled from them. There are great lessons about resilience that can be pulled from them. And that's actually some of the powerful, I think the most powerful stuff. The story you were just describing reminded me of the moment where I was at a powwow and I had been invited as a guest to join and watch. And I remember as an outsider, right, a different kind of perspective, having very similar feelings to you. Wow, look at all these strong, powerful people, particularly like the young girls dancing in this particular one. I mean, it was powerful, it was creative. There was all this creativity to their regalia and to their dance, like real like talent and beauty and wisdom in it all too, because history was intertwined with it. Um, the drums that we were listening that 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 were being used at the powwow had been given to the Ojibwe this is an amazing story. They'd been given to the Ojibwe by the Dakota. And the Dakota had lived at Mille Lacs Lake in Minnesota. And they'd lived there for a very long time. And then at some point, an Ojibwe war party came down. They had French weapons. They shot all the Dakota who were out in the open, threw gunpowder into the smokehouses, burned women and children alive. 100 years later, the Dakota came back to Mille Lacs and offered a gift of a drum as a sign of peace, as a sign of reconciliation. So all this history and power and healing is in there at this particular moment. And it's just absolutely beautiful on so many levels. But when I walked to the parking lot, got into my car, a little bit after I'd gotten off the reservation, all I could think about was those beautiful people I just saw and how vulnerable they were. How the odds are that I was staring at a woman who will go missing within that group. A young man who may be murdered, or even a woman. That, while I'm watching this moment from the inside that's so powerful, it also has this painful tinge to it, knowing the reality of the world that exists. Does that make sense to you?
No, I mean, absolutely. It's kind of like there's sort of, two worlds that I feel like I walk in a lot of times, but there is that, it's another kind of moment of just understanding like those kinds of ceremonies, those moments were things that were, banned, outlawed, that couldn't be practiced. And to see that they are continuing on is beautiful to see it go forward and seeing people come. And I think it is healing. These ceremonies, traditional moments can be extremely healing, and that's something that we need in our community. Absolutely. And it is, it can feel very overwhelming to try, and when you start to look at a lot of the issues that affect our communities, and it kind of feels like where do you start? Where can you start? Um, but it's in those moments of ceremony that I find kind of the strength and the reasoning of just continuing on, going forward, moving forward. And the people that I meet that are working with community, in community, for community for many years have been doing a lot of this very hard work, unforgiving work, that just keeps me going as well. There is, I mean, even now you hear Ann Coulter just recently talking about we didn't kill enough Indians.
Yeah, she put up a social media post literally making the point, no room for misinterpretation,
Yeah.
and then double down on it.
Yeah. And it's,
Where's the
and
condemnation?
exactly. And also, it's sort of not surprising in a lot of ways. I think people will feel that that's maybe an unsaid. That's how it feels. The relationship to, um,
Oh, the first thought that went through my head was, well, that's very on brand for America.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And but we continue. We persevere, and we um are.
Find allies and all those things. I was going to ask you about something. I had a guest on recently, and she grew up on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana, in northwest Montana. She went off to college at the University of Montana. And she said it was really interesting being at the University of Montana and then looking back and reading about what was happening on the reservation. It was the first moment that it clicked to her how violent it was. So, sort of for her, getting on the outside helped her see the abnormality of what had become normal for her. And I think you probably bring a similar kind of lens, not having grown up on a reservation, not grown up connected to your tribe. You almost have that view of the outside, and you can see the contrast. And I was wondering about that, whether you would agree with that and what that might be like.
I think, um, I sort of feel two ways about it. It's almost like the reverse, where I think I was going in expecting the sadness. And I think a lot of what sometimes we see in Native stories that are told by outsiders is this poverty porn, this look at this deep sadness and tragedy. And it is there, but I actually walk away with the feeling of the beauty uh, of
Hmm.
people and how hard just I really walked away thinking like these women can do anything. They can accomplish anything. Nothing. They're unstoppable,
And that
and
really
it's hard.
resonates in the film, right? That in many ways, as much as um, the film is a story of a woman who was killed, it it's really a story of all these strong, powerful people in her family and beyond.
That's what I had hoped for is that I wanted to show people and celebrate that strength and that power that I walked away from that my first kind of um, trips out to New Mexico with different organizations feeling is just in awe and it made me feel lazy. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Because I'm seeing these women that are heads of household that um, go to work every day, have multiple degrees, take care of their children, and then go out at night and will be working with community or just spending every last moment of their day, of their time, of their week working with community for community. And I was just like, I I'm not doing enough.
Hmm.
One. And I was just in awe of and I think that really truly is something um that's just within us, within our community members. You wanna do better so that you can help others. And
How
I
did
think
you? Oh, I'm sorry.
no, and I just think it's incredible what people do for their community members.
How did you ultimately find Diane's story and then also find her family and decide that was the story to tell?
Well, I think for the past year, I had been just doing a lot of research and going out and meeting with activists and organizers who had already been working in this world, um, and just trying to learn and listen to what they had to say, what was happening in their communities, and I ended up in New Mexico because I had the most number of cases and the government had a pretty quick response to the data that was released in creating a task force. And in 2019, I was able to get permission through the Secretary of Indian Affairs at the time, Lynn Trujillo, allowed us to film that day at that first MMIW task force meeting. And that is where I met Christine and her family. We were filming. I had been following actually someone else, another activist, that day. And when I listened to Christine's speech that you see in the film, it it was almost immediate. I just knew that I needed to get to know her and find out about her sister Dion. And uh, after that, I just, went up to her and thanked her for sharing. It was just her ability to articulate what was happening and then also be completely vulnerable and open with her emotions and what her family'd been through, um, that I just wanted to understand and find out more about her sister Dion's case and their family.
Yeah. And what was that process like as somebody who's a, writer by background and
Mhm.
used to telling people stories? Um, it's deeply personal, it's deeply intimate. And I've always felt that if you are going to do it, you're going to do it the right way and you're going to do it well. You sort of have a sacred responsibility. Um, you know, to hew to the truth, to be compassionate, to minimize harm, to tell the most powerful version of the story. You know, um, it can be a heavy weight, and it can also be difficult because you have to build trust. You have to do all sorts of different things. What was that process like for you?
Well, for me, I had worked with really sensitive subject matter previously in some of the series that I worked on that dealt with um, crime and violent acts. And so I think that really prepared me going into this project on the do's and the don'ts, really, of what I didn't want to do and how I wanted to treat this maybe a little differently, and give that time and give that space. And so I went to Christine. We just would start having chats because at the time I was still living in New York and would just come out to New Mexico when there was, when I was doing any kind of research or any activities happening. And she talked with her whole family. And I know that part of why they were interested is because there was maybe this is hope. Maybe this is some people will listen and understand, and this can help us with our sister's case and have people realize what's happening here, and really trying to advance what was going on in Dion's case at the time, which was nothing. Um, and so I think we just started from a place of, okay, really tentative, but let's see what's going to happen. And I think I was just extremely transparent with them about what I wanted to do. And I think also knowing that I'm Native, I'm Apache, that I was really holding space for this in maybe a different way than another storyteller might. And so we kind of started slow, and it was really just about being completely transparent about what we were working on and really getting their input on how they wanted this to go out into the world as well. And as the kind of years passed, it would be, I'd come out there for filming sometimes. And then when COVID hit, they were actually great with kind of filming a little bit of themselves during that time because we didn't really know what was going to happen. Um, and I think it was just showing up and just having honest conversations and just being completely open to like, hey, listen, also, if there comes a time where this is no longer something that you want to participate in or it is weighing on you too much, just you know that you can tell me that and it's okay. And just listening to them and meeting them where they were in their own process.
Yeah. I think that's a really thoughtful and compassionate way. I remember one author telling me that one of the best things he did on his book that won the Pulitzer Prize was he didn't pull out his notebook until, knowing the people for a very um, long period of time. You had said earlier that part of what her family and part of what the story you wanted to tell was what's happening here. What is happening in that part of New Mexico?
It's what I found, because we've been working on this for what is it now? 6 years almost. Um, in the very beginning, we were finding the government's reaction to the data that was coming out. I think one part of it is there was really no data because nobody was taking note. Why weren't people taking note? Is a question that, comes up. And I think that's part of when we hear people saying not invisible, say their name, it's because our community has felt invisible to the outside world, to the government for a very, very, very long time. And in this moment, in the movement of MMIW, but now I typically call it MMIWR, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives, um, people were starting to at least pay attention or listen. And I think that was great in the beginning. We had the government putting the task force together, who were incredible and worked around the clock and throughout COVID, um, making things happen, making sure to try and get data together to also create awareness. And then a year later, putting together action items for different departments, whether that was the federal government or local, state, tribal, um, and putting together actual actionable items that could help prevent and create clear communications between different departments. I think that's a big issue, is they that there's not a lot of clear communication between law enforcement, tribal law enforcement, and also families. As just a regular everyday person calling in for help, you can be navigated and, you know, run around for sometimes years trying to get answers and trying to get help for your loved ones. And so that's what we were seeing, and that's what we're still seeing right now is, um, as the years go on, you know, there are new politicians that come into office with promises, and then the years go by, and as you hear less about MMIW, less things are going, or less action is being taken. Um, you have different people taking over, and you're starting from scratch. So it really feels like a cycle of a little bit of momentum, and then starting over again with a whole new group of people. So
Yeah.
you're never getting the answers, and I can only imagine what these families feel like. How do you navigate that?
An advocate in Alaska made a point to me about this, and she came from a public policy background, and she was saying, dawned on her at some point that I need to get these requirements in law, because that's the only way when the next person comes and the next person comes, it'll be there. And you had mentioned some of the work that New Mexico had done, and they really have pulled together some very interesting resources. They've built some interesting databases. And one of the things that I've noticed, and there are definitely innovations going on in a lot of states around the crisis, but New Mexico seems to have been very public about it. Like, there are few states where I can get so much data. I went to their dashboard this morning and, you know, you could see there are 188 missing Indigenous people in New Mexico. The average number of days missing was 3,464 days. 127 of them were men, 61 were women. They broke it down by ages. So there's a level of transparency, I think public transparency there that I don't see in a lot of places. And then I know they have a partnership with the University of Nebraska in Omaha, where they're crunching the data for trends and figuring out even better ways to collect it.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether there's something as difficult as things are in New Mexico, something that states, tribes, all sorts of other groups, advocates, allies can learn from each other in a more meta way. I think of the woman in Alaska who got, training for police officers put into the law, and she might have an amazing perspective. The folks who've been handling data in New Mexico. And I'm just wondering whether maybe some of how fragmented and the way that we treat tribes and the way they end up on the back burner often in states, we're missing an opportunity to sort of more collectively work together to address the epidemic.
I think that is so right on that. With the film, we've been kind of screening a little bit in other states, and with every screening, we kind of reach out to local organizations that have been doing the work so that we can learn about what's happening there in that particular place, and also get out any of the resources that they would like to get out to different audiences at our screenings. But we're also picking up little tips and tricks that other chapters, MMIP chapters, have learned or are working on. And I think that's exactly right. It really still feels extremely fragmented, and trying to find ways to share information and share progress in a way that works for everyone. Because I think you have to also remember that a lot of times issues with collecting different data information goes back to relationships between tribal communities and outside organizations collecting all kinds of different things. And realizing that history is there, and that uh, the trust is something that needs to be worked on and figured out. And there needs to be Native people at the head of the table to make it work. I
Yep.
think.
I'm curious, what do you think by watching your film? What do you think your audience will learn? I know you had mentioned in some of the literature around the film that it's, obviously targeted to natives, but also targeted to the mainstream. So I wanted to ask you what you thought your audience would learn and what you learned by doing the film. Because, you know, if you're writing or documenting anything, it transforms you by doing it.
Mm. I think um, my hope, absolutely, the film is in a lot of ways there's a bits of kind of like a love letter to my community in there. That's how I kind of feel about it. And so my first thought is always for the Native community. I think and I've seen this so far, and it really just warms my heart, is when you have other families that are going through this, they're able to see themselves in the people that are in the film, in Christine, in Dion's story, and in their family, and have gone through the same frustrating processes. And I think for them, it's being seen, right? You are finally seeing on a big screen in an amplified way what you've been battling yourself. And I feel like that's been a bit healing for some people to see that and to be able to relate and feel not alone. For outside community members, my hope is that they will feel a call to action, a call to support. And there are so many, at every screening we try and really give actionable items, 'cause I think that's an important part of this, is that you can leave today and do something, whether that's sharing about the film, sharing about what you've seen, discussing it, or sharing financially to different organizations in your community, or showing up. That's the most important one, I think, is showing up to support the people that have been doing this work for so long. Show up and support, because it is emotionally draining, physically draining, financially draining doing the work. And we need everyone's support to come together to continue on, and make changes, to make calls to your government officials, to make noise. I hope people leave pissed off and want change and want to do something. Um, and I think, and I hope they leave feeling like they've spent some time and know someone that's been affected by this, that they feel that connection.
Connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about for you? What did you learn?
Oh, it feels endless. I feel like I learned a bit about maybe even like some of the power that I have in myself, that I can really push myself further. And I found a, a bit of my own voice and perspective and community. I think this came at such an interesting time for me, that not only was I learning and understanding about this crisis, but I really got to um, have time with other Native women in a way that just filled my heart. It was like just having so many amazing aunties and sisters,
Mhm.
um, and just learning about. Uh, a lot of times I've thought, seeing power being something like that's in your face and confronting, and I think that changed a bit for me. There's so much power also in just um
Power is way more subtle. It doesn't
ah,
have to be loud. Yeah.
no. And
And
uh,
actually, very often the deepest power doesn't make noise.
and I think that kind of changed for me as well. But I've uh just been in awe of everyone that I've been able to learn from.
So I'm going to ask you one more question.
Sure.
And I know you're not a politician, so you won't be used to this triple barrel question. It actually comes from like being at the White House and being in the press conference. You know how the president or whoever will give you one question, so they try to
Yeah.
fit three in one.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do here. Um, so for you, what does success look like for the film? What does success look like for you personally on this journey? And what do you think more broadly success looks like for Indigenous communities in America?
Woo. Okay. For for the film, success is having, to me, it's always been, the dream has always been for this to continue on, to be utilized as a tool for the organizations that are doing the work, that have been doing the work, to reach out to community, to reach out to governments and show what's happening out in our communities and what needs to be changed. And so seeing it really kind of be able to be brought to all the Native communities that we've worked with and then some. So the dream in my mind is to be able to kind of travel with the film and resources to the Native communities in New Mexico, Arizona, and who knows where else. I'm open. But really wanting to bring the film and organizations that want to get resources out to community that may not have had an opportunity to before, to also bring community together to heal, to discuss and talk, to have wellness um, educators there, to have mental health educators there, and to kind of bring everything that you could possibly need to our communities and have a moment to just gather, be together, to talk and to heal. That's in
Mm,
my mind, that's success. If we're able to do that, that's just dream come true for me.
hmm, that's awesome. That's awesome. You wrapped all the questions in one. Um,
Try, yes, exactly.
yeah. So, you know, I think one of the beautiful things, just sort of what you were saying, film has the power to heal. It has the power to connect people, whether it's connecting us because we have similar experiences or connecting us because we see the humanity in the person that we wouldn't have otherwise seen humanity in. It preserves stories. It educates people. It has um, it's just such a powerful medium and vehicle for good. Um, do you think you're going to continue in this direction of using your film as your advocacy for your people?
Yes, I think that's kind of any kind of personal success to me is just being able to continue to tell these kinds of stories to amplify issues that our people are going through and also to amplify the amazing, happy, beautiful things that are happening in our community as well. If I'm able to continue to do that in my work, that would be um, that would be success for me personally to be able to continue this because the making of this film has been healing for me too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
There's it's always about it is about the past and what we carry, but there's always an opportunity for today and for tomorrow and something better. And it's, things like this that put us a step closer. So thank you for joining. I really do appreciate it. And best of luck with the film and the families and whatever comes next. I am sure we will be on each other's paths.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time and creating the space for these stories.
If you'd like to join me for discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can also join us at our Patreon at www.patreon.com/the Silver Linings Handbook. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We'll see you guys all again in a few days.